Hello guys, welcome to my humble YouTube channel where I bring you fanfiction that will brighten your days. Before we start, a subscribe is greatly appreciated, and don't forget to leave a like and ring the bell icon so you won't miss exciting new fanfiction stories. Alright, let us begin on this new fanfiction story, Tensura, of Bonds and Demon Lords by Ryagful. Chapter 3. A day out in Tempest. Rimuru Tempest, king of the Jura Tempest Federation, personal friend of Storm Dragon Veldora and all-around nice slime, was in a dilemma. That dilemma was the dragonoid demon lord Loli, known as Milam Nava, who was currently dragging him all over the outdoor bath. Completely naked. She was on the small size, making it somewhat questionable, legally speaking. On the other, he was no longer a human, but a slime. And even more than that, she was not human either, but a freaking demon lord that was thousands of years old allegedly and didn't seem to care one bit about being seen completely exposed. And even further. No, he was just making excuses at this point. Would anyone even care he was looking? He seriously doubted. In his own world, people as young as 13 getting married was very much the norm for the vast majority of human history. Didn't mean he agreed, but that was just how things were. From what he gathered about this world, it wasn't far off the mark. According to Iran and her party of adventurers, the age of adulthood in most nations was 15, and monsters as young as 2 or 3 years old were considered fully grown up. He pondered just how Milam fitted in. She obviously stopped aging a long time ago, and, despite her childish persona, glimpses of a far different girl came through every so often, as expected of an individual who had probably been alive longer than half the city combined. At least that was what he had noticed in the one day he had known her. Speaking of which, his ordeal as her chaperone began shortly after their impromptu battle concluded. Was all Rimuru could muster to say to the new developments. Milam simply ignored him and continued to laugh for a few seconds more, then abruptly stopped. Hey, any of you guys have something to drink? This thing is great but it's making me kinda thirsty, she said, motioning to the jar of honey. Of course, she didn't really need to drink, but they didn't need to know that. After a few more seconds of just staring at her, Rimuru decided it would not be worth the hassle to try and convince her to leave. So he just sighed. Sure, he said dejectedly as he turned to leave, Milam following close behind. I'll get you something in town. Thus the group began its short journey back to Tempest, Demon Lord in tow. Rimuru was riding on Ranga, with Milam right behind him. He wasn't sure if Ranga approved, but no one was stupid to refuse her now. He wondered if all demon lords were as pushy and selfish as her. He realized that, yes, probably. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, after all, and not always in the oppressive tyrant kind of way. They probably had to have been selfish and power-hungry enough to reach that point in the first place. With that though, he wondered just what drove this girl who didn't look older than 14 to become as absurdly powerful as she was. She called herself a dragonoid. What does that even mean? He wondered to himself. Notice. A dragonoid is a unique race belonging to someone born of a dragon in a lesser race. Great Sage helpfully answered. The offspring of a dragon in a lesser race. Wonder how that works. Can dragons turn themselves into humans? His though was interrupted by Milam calling him from behind. Hey, be straight with me. Have you ever considered becoming a demon lord? Rimuru honestly never even considered that an option, and he answered in kind. Nope. I haven't and I won't. Never gonna happen. If he was paying attention, he would have noticed Milam scowling at the answer. Ever since they began moving, she tried really hard to figure out why this slime piqued her interest in the way he did. Ever since their first talk, she had this feeling, deep in her heart, that she couldn't quite make out. She wondered if maybe it was just her intuition telling her this guy had great potential to become a great demon lord, so she asked him. His answer was not what she expected. But then why did you absorb the Orc Lord? At this question, Rimuru had to turn around in a surprise. He was met with a serious-looking Milam. Yeah. I figured that out when we first met earlier. You just have a special kind of feeling to you. Rimuru considered carefully how to answer that. I didn't absorb him to become a demon lord. He began as he turned back around. I did it to end his rampage. In the process I also saved him in the orcs. That's all. He could feel Milam's gaze on him linger for a second. So why not become a demon lord? It's quite fun, you know. You have respect, you get to fight all kinds of powerful people, you No thanks, sounds boring. Aren't you bored of that? He could practically sense Milam making a comically shocked face, nearly dropping her jar of honey in the process. Bingo, huh? Are all demon lords just bored? Then. What do you do that's so fun, huh? Milam asked quickly, obviously no longer thinking too much about what she said. Lots of things. But I'm mostly just really busy with running my nation. He answered back, thinking the idea would push Milam to get disinterested and leave. How wrong he was. Lots of things. Hey, what are these lots of things? They can't possibly be just running a nation. What are you doing that's so interesting? Tell me, she screamed and began shaking him from the back. Ah, is she throwing a tantrum? This backfired. Abort. Rimuru began to panic again. Ah, no, it's nothing that would interest you, really. He said sheepishly, then realized it was too late. Milam wanted to see the city, and wanted to see what he was doing. There was basically nothing he could do to change that. So, he decided. Listen. If you promise to behave in my town, and that means holding back your aura and power, then I'll show you around, yeah. At this Milam instantly calmed down and beamed a bright smile. Yeah, you got it. Hearing her say that with that smile on her face made Rimuru feel something he wasn't quite sure where to place. He decided to ignore it, and for the sake of his own sanity entertain his new friend, huh? Why not? He decided to voice that opinion. Then I guess that makes us friends now. He answered back with a smile of his own. Hearing him call her friend, made Milam feel strange again. Friends. She muttered without anyone hearing it. As she said that, they finally came around the hill and entered the city proper. Rimuru looked over at Milam and saw her sport a look of excitement that almost made all the trouble so far seem worth it. However, he still wanted her to behave, so he began laying down some rules. Just promise me a few things, okay? Don't wander around, and don't cause trouble unless I. Before he could even finish, however, Milam was already breaking his first rule, speeding off into the street. This is gonna be a long day. Thus began Milam Nava's first day in Tempest. To put it plainly, for Rimuru it was a roller coaster of entertaining and nerve-wracking. Right off the bat, Milam got into a scuffle, or rather a one-sided curb stomp, when she ran into that dolt Gabiru who called her a little girt to her face. Lucky for him, she held back. In so much that he didn't die instantly from one punch. Scolding her seemed pointless, especially as Gabiru kinda deserved it for being rude in the first place, but still. He did ask her to not do something like that again, but she made no promises. Well, he tried. The next thing was to have everyone gather in the central square so he could formally introduce Milam to the city. Mostly so everyone knew who she was so as not to repeat the Gabiru incident. During the introduction, she grabbed the microphone out of his hands and began introducing herself. I'm Demon Lord Milam Nava, and I'll be living here starting today. Nice to meet you, she announced casually. Wah. What does that mean? He asked, pretty self-explanatory. I decided to live here for now. But don't you have your own home right now? It's fine. She said dismissively, long as I visit every now and then it'll be fine. And so she turned back to address the gathered crowd. Me and Rimuru are friends now. No, actually. Best friends, she proclaimed such, and the crowd went wild with cheers and applause. Apparently, Milam was surprisingly popular among the demon lords, despite of her reputation as the destroyer. Thus Tempest gained a new citizen, an extremely overpowered one. The day that followed was hectic to say the least. His helpful counselors decided to just throw the responsibility of handling Milam firmly of his shoulders. You're her best friend, after all, said that bastard Benimaru, and so he had to, as promised, show her around. And he found himself enjoying it, though he would deny it to hell and back if asked. Among the different things to do in Tempest, by far her favorite thing was the food. As Rimuru quickly deduced, a rather great sage informed him someone with the power of a demon lord simply no longer had any need to eat, drink, sleep or even breathe oxygen. All of their needs were met by their vast magicule reserves, making them effectively immortal. As such, things like food and drinks were simply a novelty to stimulate their senses, and stimulate her senses Milam was all about, it seemed. What the? How does some vegetable soup taste so good? She asked as she was eating in one of the dining halls. Ah, that's the smoked meat we put in it, he informed her, to which she made the most curious expression. As she continued to eat, he decided to ask her something. Hey, Is the food in your place not good? At that, her face changed into a scowl. Bad question? Blah. The cooking in my nation stops at roasted meat and raw vegetables. She informed him with disgust. Good thing I don't need food to live. Stops at roasted meat? Raw vegetables. UAA. No wonder she finds even this simple soup good. His thoughts were interrupted by Milam slamming a fist quite gently for her, as the table didn't explode into splinters, and exclaimed. Rimuru. Think you could do me a favor? She asked with pleading eyes. As much as he hated to admit, he wouldn't be able to say no to the expression she had even if she wasn't so dangerous. Think you can take one of my people in to learn all of these delicious dishes? Please? Ah, sure. He didn't though this would be much of an issue, so he agreed rather quickly. His reward was another bright smile from Milam. Maybe this isn't so bad. He though with a smile of his own. The impromptu tour of Tempest continued with a visit to the workshops. He was especially eager to take her to Shuna's clothing place so that, maybe, Milam could put on some proper clothes as her usual appear left. Quite a bit to be desired. As it turned out, Shuna was quite pleased to meet Milam and quickly took to turn her into her personal fashion doll, to which the Demon Lord did not object. In fact, the various new outfits she gained out of it made it so that he barely convinced her to leave. Girls love new outfits, I guess, no matter what world it is or how godlike powerful they are. He thought to himself as they left, glancing at Milam, who was now wearing a sort of sailor uniform that was quite the improvement to her first one outfit. Next were the crop fields, where things escalated quickly. Seeing the hobgoblins hard at work, Milam got the idea to lend a hand. Rimuru was skeptical at first, but it turned out had no reason to worry. Quite the opposite. Milam was a quick learner, to put it simply. After having one demonstration of what to do, she proceeded to till the fields like an expert that had done it her entire life. And by tilling the field, he did not meant one parcel or two. No, she did almost the entire thing in a few minutes, moving so fast even he had trouble keeping up. And somehow, there was no dust or insane wind speed from her movement. He reasoned she suppressed both with her aura, or something. In any case, she did the job of hundreds of workers in less than an hour, much to the shock and cheers of the guys working. Everyone except Ririna, who was livid that her carefully laid schedule for the crops were completely ruined. Rimuru quickly took Milam out of there before the Goblina could say anything. By the time night fell, he was mentally done. Even if he had some fun along the way, he mostly had the pain of keeping Milam in check from this and that, and just couldn't be bothered to do anything else as he led her to the main dining hall where all his counselors were gathered. There, they had a nice diner suite, delicious curry, and began talking about various small things. You are just amazing, bestie. Milam bellowed in between messy mouthfuls. He wasn't sure exactly what she was referring to, but decided not to ask. How do you even think of all these amazing things? He wanted to say something along the lines of, I'm not that amazing, but was interrupted by a certain ogress. Foo foo foo, even Lady Milam recognizes your greatness, Lord Rimuru. Sheehan said in between equally messy mouthfuls, no, don't encourage her. He wanted to shout, but though better of it. Just keep eating, Rimuru. Keep eating. A conversation erupted among the group on what Sheehan had said, but he decided to tune it out. Instead, he looked over at Milam, who stopped eating and was also staring at him, a small smile on her lips. Eh? Was she serious? He wondered. Amazing. Nothing here would have been possible without everyone's hard effort. As if reading his mind, this was becoming a regular occurrence. Milam spoke up among the chatter. Yeah. I mean, nothing here would exist without Rimuru, right? She asked no one in particular. Indeed. Surprisingly, it was Hakuro who answered, talent is useless without a proper guidance, after all. The people of this city came together to make all this because they believe in Lord Rimuru. He finished with a grandfatherly smile. Yes, indeed, said Rigard, nodding vigorously, as another round of chatter erupted among the occupants of the room, all about how he was somehow the greatest thing to ever exist. He looked over at Milam again, who just continued to eat and smile. This girl is dangerous, in more ways than one, he thought, finding himself smiling back. A while later, after everyone finished eating, Shuna asked Milam if she would like to take a bath. Milam asked where the bathroom was, confused. Apparently, bathrooms with small bathing pools are the norm in this world, even for aristocrats, so she was rather confused when she was directed outside. Of course, confusion turned to excitement when she saw the massive onsen they had built. So much so that she didn't hesitate to take everything off and jump in. Of course, only the women, specifically Shuna and Xian, were with her, while the guys, him included, sadly, waited their turn. Much to Rimaru's mix of delight and trepidation, a few minutes later Milim burst through the door wearing nothing but a towel, excitedly explaining how you could even swim in the onsen. It was that big. You're not supposed to swim in the onsen, though. He wanted to say, but before he could make any sound she snatched him off the table. He was now in his slime form and ran off into the onsen with Shuna and Xian running after her. And thus, Rimuru Tempest ended up in his current predicament, being used as a water ball by Milim as Shuna and Xian just watched from the sidelines. Eventually, however, the Demon Lord tired and let him rest. She herself looked really content, just soaking up in the heat. He could barely tell it was the same person from a few seconds ago. With her hair down like this, she looked quite a bit more pretty than she already was. If it wasn't for her more excitable part of her personality, he could almost feel safe with having her around. He continued to keep an eye on her. I am not ogling. Thank you very much. He reassured himself and kinda lost track of time. At some point, both Shuna and Xian had left the pool to dry off, leaving them by themselves, and the night sky got completely dark and covered in stars. Hey, Rimuru. Milim's voice sounded softer than usual as she spoke, looking up into the night sky. Even the stars look kinda nicer from here, she absent-mindedly said. What is she talking about? He wondered, looking up himself for a moment. They look about the same to me. No, it's true. I've been around you known, and... As she said so, she moved a little closer to him and got lower so they were at eye level. This is the best spot I've found, she finished with a playful smirk. Ah, is that so? Glad you like it, he said as he turned to look up again and try and see what she was talking about, and certain not to avoid eye contact. After a while, he could feel her leaning against him. At least she's not thrashing me all over the pool. They stayed like that for a while, until Rimuru thought to ask her something that he was curious about. Hey, Milim? Yeah, came her immediate response. I was just wondering. Why did you become a demon lord? At this, the girl's blue eyes suddenly became distant, as if she was recalling a long-forgotten memory. Though he saw a flash of sadness in them, but it was quickly gone as she responded. Something bad happened, and I got really angry? Why are you asking me? He asked confused, noting that Milim seemed to look confused herself. I don't know. It was a long time ago, so I forgot, she dismissed as she turned to look away. Oh. It probably wasn't a pleasant memory, huh? Rimuru realized. Seeing her look all dejected like that just feels wrong, somehow. There was one thing Rimuru came to realize about Milim Nava during the short time he knew her was that being sad just didn't suit her at all. But more than that, she never let it drag her down for more than a moment. Sure enough, she was right back to her cheerful self before he could even feel sorry for her, splashing water all over him. This time, however, he decided not to try and calm her down and just enjoyed himself for once too. Chapter 4. Intruders. It was a few days since Demon Lord Milim had decided to move into Tempest. They were, to Rimuru at least, pure chaos, as he tried to juggle keeping her from destroying something, running the city and the daily training with Hakuro and the others. Somehow, however, he managed to do it. He deserved a pat on his slime back for that. With Milim at least, he could at least leave her be with Shuna to be her dress-up doll. She seemed content enough to just try anything new, even if it was just clothes she didn't need. And so far, even when he wasn't around, she managed to hold herself back well enough to not cause too much trouble. Relatively speaking. Rigard was still twitching from all the doors she had destroyed, but otherwise nothing major. He would buy the old hobgoblin a drink later. To alleviate some of his problems in the form of an overpowered teen girl, he tasked Kurobe and Kijin with making Milim a special pair of gauntlets that would reduce the strength of her punches. It was a daunting task, but somehow the two succeeded, and Milim quickly took to the dragon gauntlets, even wearing them with outfits that just didn't match, and didn't seem to mind at all the real reason he gave them. Even if he didn't tell her, he was not foolish enough to think she didn't realize. That dragon eye was scary. Today, he left her with Shuna to try on more outfits. Right now, he was located in Veldora's old cave, having a meeting with Vesta and Gabiru about their potion production. After a quick report on Gabiru's efforts to grow Hypoku plants, Vesta brought out a vial and placed it on the table in front of Slime Rimuru. This is my latest version of the healing potion, he said proudly, though unlike their time in Dwargo it was absent of arrogance and more genuine. "What do you think, my lord?" Rimuru gave the potion a quick once-over, absorbing part of the liquid to allow Great Sage to analyze its content. After a short pause, he replied, "It's the same thing that I make. With the help of Great Sage," he added to himself, "it's a full potion. A drought that will restore full health. Well done." He praised them honestly. Gabiru threw his hands in the air and cheered, while Vesta had a look of disbelief cross his face. Kaijin came behind him and gave him a good, hearty pat on the back, much to Vesta's embarrassment. The two had, over the last few weeks since Vesta arrived here, gotten friendly, and Rimuru would have found it hard to believe the two were bitter enemies not long ago if he didn't saw it for himself. In fact, he thought that the two were a little too friendly, chatting away in their difficult-to-understand technical jargon that just went over his head. After a while, he realized he was basically forgotten and, not finding a good moment to interrupt, decided to just leave silently. He quickly made his way through the cave lit up by the newly created magic steel light cables and arrived outside via the teleportation pad set up by Vesta. And just as he was hopping off it, a massive column of flame shot up from one of the main streets ahead of him. Oh no! As he quickly took human shape, grew a pair of wings and flew over as quick as possible. As he landed, he saw a large crowd, among which stood Zoe. "Zoe, what the hell is going on?" "My apologies, sir," he said as he bowed. "We detected some intruders, but were too slow to respond." He followed Zoe's gaze and landed on a sight that filled him with a dread feeling. Milam was standing over a guy he never saw before, with another pair some distance away, shaking in abject fear from her aura. And closer to Rimuru was Rigard, who was kneeling on the ground with his back to him. As Rimuru moved closer to get a better look, the hobgoblin turned to look at him. "Aarrrgg." Rimuru screamed internally at the sight of half of his face literally melted off, one eye socket empty. It made him thankful slime didn't have a nausea reaction, because that would have definitively made him puke otherwise. Before he could say anything, Rigard spoke up. "Oh, Lord Rimuru, thank goodness." He stopped when he saw his lord's reaction to his injury and quickly tried to talk it off as if it was nothing. No, please, this is fine. I'm fine." Rimuru was not convinced. "What? There's nothing fine about that. Here, have a healing potion, idiot." He splashed some healing liquid directly on the hobgoblin's face. Miraculously, everything was back to normal in a blink, even the eye restored as if nothing happened. As he was investigating to see if anything else was wrong with Rigard, he heard Milam quickly approaching them. "Hey, Rimuru. These jackasses were harassing your people, but don't worry. Your bestie took care of 'em. Wahahaha," she proclaimed, looking proudly about herself. Rimuru was kinda mad. He was ready to explode at her, and she must have noticed because she quickly started to try and make excuses. No, it's fine. They're not from you city, so it doesn't count." "Yeah?" As far as he was concerned, it did count. He was about to say as much when Rigard hastily interjected. "Lord Rimuru, wait. It's not Lady Milam's fault at all. In fact, she saved us. Please listen." Until then, Rimuru had never heard Rigard talk about Milam with anything short of annoyance, so to hear him say that made him pause. "It's true, sir. As much as I hate to admit my failure," he heard Zoe speak from behind. Then the two began to recount the earlier events. The city square was busy as always, with various workers moving to and from. It was a peaceful day, with the sun shining brightly in a cool but refreshing autumn air about. Rigard was making his daily paces through the city, ensuring everything was in working order, when a commotion on the main street caught his attention. The crowd parted to reveal a quadruplet of what he assumed were beastmen from their beastly features, including tails, also called lycanthropes for their ability to turn partially or fully into a beast form. There was a tall one with cat-like features sporting dark armor and a haughty smirk on his face, a large ape-like man, a thin one that had goat-like horns, and a small, rodent-like one. They strode into the city as if they owned the place, stopping when they reached the middle of the square. "This is a nice town you have here. Perfect for Lord Carrion to rule, don't you think?" He asked no one in particular as he looked around. Hearing the man say that riled Rigard's ire, but he contained himself. He had to follow Lord Rimuru's rules of not picking fights with strangers, after all. He approached the four calmly and said, "Welcome to Tempest. May I be of assistance? I am the main administrator of this city, Rigard." he said politely, but the tall man did not seem keen on returning the favor. I said, "This would be a nice place for my lord, Demon Lord Carrion, to rule over. Did you not hear me?" The man retorted with anger. At this, Rigurd had only one thing to say. "You must be joking." This angered the tall beast man even further, and with no warning hit Rigurd across the face, sending him flying across the pavement. But he wasn't finished, as when he turned to the gathered crowd he saw they were less scared and more outraged, scowling at him. "Know your place, weaklings," he shouted and created a ball of flames in his right hand. In a flash, he launched it straight at the crowd. The ball created a large amount of flames in its wake. Right before it hit the panicking crowd, however, a blur of pink appeared right in front of them. With a quick motion that even Zoe, who had just arrived on the scene, couldn't discern, Demon Lord Milam deflected the wall of flame into the air, away from the city. The tall beast man was shocked to say the least, but this quickly turned to terror as he saw a dangerous red aura surrounding the girl. That was when the realization of who she was hit him. "Demon Lord Milam!" He screamed, preparing another fireball, but it was too late. Before he could even blink, Milam had appeared right in front of him, striking him with a heavy fist straight in the stomach, knocking him unconscious before he even hit the pavement. As Zoe finished the explanation, Rimuru could really only stare in disgust at the sprayed, unconscious body of the beastman in question. Whatever anger he had with Milam for breaking her promise was gone, as he was now fully focused on him. He absent-mindedly heard Zoe continue. There were even children among the crowd. He still didn't hesitate to shoot. "Okay. Now I'm really pissed. How dare this trash?" Rimuru took a deep breath, trying to calm himself down before he let his anger take over and cause him to take rash decisions. He turned to Milam, who had an unusually serious look on her face as she observed him. "Milam, thank you for protecting my people. I don't like that you picked a fight, but thank you for that. Just let us handle it in the future, okay?" he said softly to her, and was a bit taken aback when she scowled at him. "I live here too, you know," she proclaimed, balling a fist. "I can't just stand by and watch, right?" She sounded like she was trying to convince him, so he decided to let her be for now and sighed. "Yes, you live here, but unless it looks like we can't handle it, stay out of it, okay?" She didn't look entirely convinced, but nodded as she crossed her arms. "She's pouting again," he thought as she took the now fairly familiar, pouty face, which he certainly did not find cute. Not at all. In any case, his attention was drawn to Rigurd, who had bowed his head to Milam. "Thank you very much for the assistance, Lady Milam," he said with sincerity, followed by several of the citizens from the crowd she had protected. It must have took her seriously off guard because her face flashed a shade of red, but only for a second. "Ah, of course, no problem at all for me. Wahahaha. She must really not have thought much of it, huh?" he thought as he gauged her reaction. He decided that maybe he could thank her too, later, with a special dish of food. Until then, however, there was the issue of what to do with the intruders. "Want me to take out the trash?" he heard Milam say, pointing at the unconscious beastman. He decided to cancel the dish. A while later, Rimuru was sitting in the lobby of their new governmental building, with the leader of the beast men, who had regained his consciousness and introduced himself as Phobio, sitting across from him. His counselors were sitting behind him, while Milam was sitting on a sofa way back, eating lunch as if nothing was wrong. He supposed to her, this was nothing. After the man introduced himself, Rimuru realized he was by far no weakling. Great Sage estimated his magicals to be higher than Benimaru. He really hoped he could salvage the situation, but he made no effort to hide his displeasure at Phobio's actions, allowing his aura to emerge freely. It seemed to work, or at least he thought it did. Having Milam around certainly seemed to knock the haughty idiot a peg or two down. "So, let's get straight to the point. Why are you here?" Rimuru asked. "Why the hell would I answer to some lowly slime?" Phobio shot back, earning himself the full and undivided anger of the ogres. "Hey, stay out of this," Rimuru ordered them, to which they stepped back down. "Ha ha. What a bunch of weaklings. Taking orders from some slime." Phobio laughed. Rimuru's patience was straining thin, but he managed to hold it together. "Listen. I'm running out of patience here, so you better start talking," he warned, increasing his aura by bit to emphasize how serious he was. Though Phobio was likely stronger than Benimaru, Rimuru was confident that he could take the idiot on if need be. The display seemed to have worked as Phobio settled down and scowled at him. Tisk, fine. We're here to investigate this city for Demon Lord Carrion, the Beast King, and... Peef, ha, ha, good one. Milam rudely interrupted from the sofa. Rimuru turned his attention behind to see her laughing. Is there something you want to say, Milam? He asked with a hint of annoyance. He had hoped she would stay out of this part, but it didn't seem likely. For her part, Milam seemed to have turned on her more serious mode, and continued talking as she stood up. Yeah, this guy is full of crap. No way Carrion would send such an idiot over here to make contact with you guys. She calmly explained as she stepped forward, stopping at Rimuru's right side with her arms crossed. Also, he knows I'm here. He agreed not to interfere with me, so he definitely would not send such an idiot here. He's here on his own. Aren't ya? She finished with a mocking grin directed at Phobio, who looked like someone had just caught him with his pants down. He was definitely angry, vein-throbbing and everything. We were sent to the forest. He began, sounding as if he was having trouble piecing together his thoughts through his anger. The guy definitely had some issues, Rimuru concluded. But not to my city, is that correct? Rimuru interrupted him. Your lord sent you to investigate the Orc Lord battle. Over at Lake Shisu, not here, correct? You certainly were not told to invade my city and attack my citizens, were you? He concluded. If Demon Lord Carrion did indeed wanted to recruit them, sending this guy was the worst possible choice. Maybe he did send him, but the meathead completely misinterpreted the orders. Or maybe Milam overestimates this Carrion guy. Rimuru thought to himself as he looked between the angry Phobio and calm if smug Milam. He decided to try and de-escalate the atmosphere a little. Hey, Milam, thanks for the input, but could you please stay out now? He kindly asked her. Ah, sure. I said what I wanted anyway, she said and casually strolled back to the sofa, bringing her jar of honey out of her storage space as she plopped down. Once he was sure the Demon Lord was no longer interested, Rimuru turned his attention back to the Beastman, considering his words carefully. Listen. Your actions here today could very well spark a conflict between your lord and our alliance, depending on how things go. Is the decision to go to war with the entire Jura forest yours, or your master's? With the severity of his actions put forth in such a manner, it seemed that Phobio finally realized exactly what he had done. His eyes widened and his anger seemed to subside for a moment, and he considered how his master would react. Seeing this, Rimuru decided to end the conversation. You should leave, and tell your master that if he wants something from me, he can send a proper envoy and I'll gladly entertain negotiations. But you are not welcomed here anymore. Leave, he ordered sternly, to which Phobio's anger seemed to return. The Beastman slammed his fist in the table, got up, and began to walk out. He stopped in the door, however, and glanced at Milam, who only smiled and made a little mocking wave. Phobio's vein looked ready to explode as he finally stepped out, his lackeys closed behind. The guy needs to seriously calm down a bit, thought Rimuru as he watched him leave, then turned to Milam. Now then. Hey, Milam, can I ask you a few things about Carrion? At this, she again had a serious look on her face. Sorry, but I can't tell you anything. We have an agreement, you see. She rebutted his request, but she did admit they had an agreement, which gave him an idea. He quickly moved over to the sofa and plopped down beside her, leaning in a bit. Is it an agreement with just Carrion, or all the demon lords? She however didn't look like she was gonna budge on the issue, so he decided to play dirty. Aw damn, so you can't even tell your best friend, huh? It's a shame, he said with fake but surprisingly genuine disappointment. That seemed to move her, as she quickly began to fidget and panic. One more push, he thought. Maybe you don't care what happens to your bestie. That did it. Milam was now genuinely shocked, looking almost ready to cry. Though he felt kinda bad about it, for now he needed information. No, I do care, it's just. Milam stuttered for a bit more before shouting. Ah, fine. But, only what relates to you, okay. She said, not realizing that was more or less what he wanted. Of course, information on the other demon lords might be valuable, but for now all he needed was to know about her agreement with Carrion and what their intentions were. Of course, he answered as he sat back and listened to her story. About how Gelmid approached her, Carrion and Clayman, and how she later dragged Frey into supporting his plan to create the Orc Lord and ascend him into a demon lord they could control. Apparently, to do anything major among the demon lords, A voting system was in place that required at least 3 supporters to pass, so having a demon lord under one's control certainly seemed to him like a way to cheat the system. Of course, he and his subordinates had completely ruined Gelmud's plan. Afterwards, the 4 agreed to investigate the battle to see who came out victorious, though Milim claimed she knew the Orc Lord would lose the moment she saw Rimuru in the crystal ball. She lost all interest in the original plan when she glimpsed his fight against Gelmud and was now only interested in goofing around with him, which he certainly preferred over what the other demon lords might have planned. He decided to ask what those plans might be. "Ah, I really shouldn't tell, but whatever," she answered with a shrug. "Carrion will probably try to recruit you to join him, but he's a pretty level-headed guy, so he'll be mostly reasonable about it." Frey. She crossed her arms and looked up though I doubt she's interested. She looked distracted by something else. "I don't think you should worry about her. Then there's Clayman." At this, she scowled and closed her eyes, silent for a few seconds. "Dunno about that guy. He's always scheming something, though." She trailed off and threw her hands up in surrender. "Well, that's all I got." "Really?" he asked, disappointed, but this time it didn't look like it was gonna convince her as she just threw herself across the sofa, unusually silent. "Well, alright, that's enough for now. Hey." Sometimes in the middle of Milim's explanation, he had turned back into his slime form, and now the demon lord grabbed him and began using him as an impromptu pillow. Before he could protest further, though, she was already fast asleep. "Great," he thought as she began to droll on him a bit. "Is this revenge on me for guilt-tripping her into talking? Nah, probably not." Of course, it was exactly that. He and his subordinates spent the next few hours discussing the information they had gathered from Milim, and whatever Zoe could piece together about the demon lords, going back and forth on how to react if they were approached again. As night rolled around, the party began to scatter and eventually he was left alone with Milim, still serving as her pillow well into the morning. If asked if he minded, he would say yes. But that would be a lie. Damn that Milim. Phobio's scream rang out in the forest, followed by a loud crack as his fist made an entire tree fall over. How humiliating. Lord Carrion would never have fallen so low. "Sir Phobio, please calm down." One of his companions tried to interject, with Demon Lord Milim there even Lord Carrion would have trouble. "Shut up. That's not the only problem. That damn slime was right. Even without her there, I messed up. This will only cause trouble for our lord." He finished dejectedly. His comrades understood exactly where he was coming from. To the lycanthropes of Eurazania, Beast King Carrion was a legend, a warrior who had risen to the rank of Demon Lord hundreds of years prior and who became a symbol of their strength and hope as he led the defense of their home in the Great War. No one among the beastmen did not greatly respect or even revere the king. To be of use to him was the greatest desire among the warriors of the kingdom, and to cause him trouble the greatest dishonor. His comrades looked on with pity as a voice rang out from somewhere deeper in the forest. I understand well your frustration. Keeping it under control is quite difficult, isn't it?" The 4 beastmen quickly turned to the source of the voice. From among the darkness of the overgrowth, a large shadow emerged and jumped right in front of them. It was a large, fat man in a jester costume, wearing an angry mask. "Who are you?" Phobio demanded as he prepared his claws. "I am Footman, the Angry Clown, a member of the Moderate Harlequin Alliance. Pleasure is all mine, Beastman of Eurazania." The large clown introduced himself with a light bow. From behind him, a much smaller clown, a small girl, emerged wearing a mask with a crying face. "And I'm Tear, the Teardrop Clown," she said as she waved. The 4 beastmen were slightly stumped, especially Phobio. Despite their looks, they had a certain dangerous aura about them. He exchanged glances with his comrades before focusing on the intruders. "Moderate Harlequin Alliance. Never heard of it. Now what do you want?" "We're an odd jobs mercenary group, you see." The girl started as she moved in front of the group, "and we have a proposition for you." Thinking carefully, Phobio decided that he had allowed his anger to rule him for quite enough that day. These clowns were not worth it pushing it further, so he just turned around and began leaving. "Not interested. I want nothing from you fishy-looking clowns, however." Demon Lord Milim, at the mention of that name, he stopped and glanced back at the girl. "Needs to be taught a lesson, doesn't she? How do you want power?" The angry clown interrupted, getting right in his face. "Because we can offer you power. The power to defeat even a demon lord," the girl added. Despite the protests of his companions, Phobio decided to hear the two clowns out, listening intently to their explanation about the coming awakening of the great beast known as Charybdis and how the two clowns knew of a way to take it. Deep inside, Phobio thought that the whole thing sounded sketchy. But at the same time, he realized that he could just not face his lord after the trouble his actions would certainly cause. His shame was too great. And he had an opportunity to wipe away some of it. Tell our lord I formally quit from the three beastketeers. Any action I take from now on is on my own. No fault will fall on anyone but me. He told his companions before walking off into the darkness with the clown.